The rancher's redemption. The dust swirled around Samuel Morrison's boots as he stood at the edge of the crowd, his weathered hands gripping his hat. The October sun beat down mercilessly on the makeshift auction platform in the center of Millfield's Main Street, where men shouted bids for land, livestock, and things that should never have been for sale. Samuel had come to town for supplies, nothing more. His ranch 20 miles north was struggling through another harsh season, and he needed salt, flour, and maybe a decent plow horse if the price was right. He hadn't planned on staying for the auction, but something had drawn him into the crowd of rough-faced men and curious townspeople. At 42, Samuel was known throughout the territory as a fair man, but a solitary one. His wife Mary had died of fever 3 years prior, taking their unborn child with her. Since then, he'd spoken to few people beyond what was necessary for business. The ranch hands he employed were good men, but they knew to give him space. Grief had carved deep lines around his gray eyes and turned his brown hair prematurely silver at the temples. "Next lot," called out the auctioneer, a thin man with a voice like gravel. "Young Cheyenne girl, maybe 16 years, speaks some English. Good for household work." Samuel's stomach turned as a girl was led onto the platform. She was small and slight, with long black braids and dark eyes that seemed to look right through the crowd. Her dress was little more than rags, but she held her head high with a dignity that made Samuel's chest ache. She reminded him of a wild horse he'd once seen, broken but not defeated, her spirit flickering like a flame that refused to die. The bidding started at 50 cents. Samuel watched in horror as the price climbed slowly. 75 cents, $1, $1.50. The men bidding weren't ranchers looking for help. Their leering eyes and crude comments made their intentions clear. Samuel's hands clenched into fists. $2, shouted Jake Brennan, a man known for his cruelty to animals and worse reputation with women. He grinned, showing missing teeth. "That's generous for a savage." The girl's eyes found Samuel's across the crowd. For just a moment he saw past her stoic mask to the fear beneath. She was just a child, probably younger than 16, trying to be brave in a situation no one should ever face. $2 going once, the auctioneer called. Samuel's mouth went dry. $2 was nearly nothing to him, but it might as well have been 200. What was he thinking? He was a grieving widower who could barely take care of himself, let alone a traumatized girl who probably didn't even want his help. Going twice, but those eyes that held pain he recognized, courage he admired, and a desperate hidden plea for someone, anyone, to see her as human. $2.50, Samuel heard himself say, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. Heads turned toward him. Jake Brennan's face darkened with anger. $3, he spat. $5, Samuel said immediately, stepping forward. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. A murmur went through the crowd. $5 was more than most would spend on a horse. Brennan's eyes narrowed, but he had the sense not to bid against Samuel Morrison. Everyone knew the rancher was honest, but not a man to cross. $5 going once. Twice, sold to Mr. Morrison. Samuel felt dizzy as he made his way to the auctioneer's table to pay. What had he done? He didn't even know the girl's name, didn't know if she'd want to come with him or if she'd try to run at the first opportunity. All he knew was that he couldn't let Jake Brennan or any of the other vultures in that crowd get their hands on her. The transaction was completed with brutal efficiency. Papers were signed, money changed hands, and suddenly Samuel found himself walking toward the girl who now, legally and sickeningly, belonged to him. She watched him approach with wary eyes, her body tense like she was ready to bolt. "What's your name?" he asked quietly when he reached her. She studied his face for a long moment before answering. "Ayana." Her voice was soft but clear, with only a slight accent. "Ayana," he repeated, trying to get the pronunciation right. "I'm Samuel Morrison. I have a ranch north of here." He paused, struggling with words that felt inadequate. "I want you to know that you're safe with me. I'm not like those other men." Her expression didn't change, but he thought he saw something shift in her eyes. Suspicion, maybe, but also the faintest glimmer of hope. The ride to the ranch took most of the afternoon. Samuel had bought a gentle mare for Ayanna to ride, along with some basic supplies and a few dresses from the general store. She rode silently beside him, scanning the horizon with eyes that missed nothing. When they stopped to water the horses at a stream, she drank carefully, washing her hands and face with movements that seemed almost ritualistic. "You can run if you want," Samuel said suddenly. "I won't chase you." She looked at him with surprise. Where would I go? It was a fair question. Her people had been driven from their ancestral lands years ago. The nearest reservation was hundreds of miles away, and the journey would be dangerous for a young woman alone. Samuel felt a fresh wave of anger at the circumstances that had brought her to that auction block. "I don't know," he admitted, "but the choice should be yours." For the first time, her stoic mask slipped slightly. "Why did you bid on me?" Samuel was quiet for so long that she probably thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Because you looked like someone who deserved better than what those men would have given you." They rode the rest of the way in contemplative silence. The Morrison ranch was modest but well maintained. The house was a simple two-story structure with a wide porch, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. Samuel's three ranch hands, Miguel, Tom, and young Billy, looked curious but respectful as Samuel introduced Ayanna simply as someone who would be helping around the house. "The spare room upstairs is yours," Samuel told her as they entered the house. "It has a lock on the door, and you're the only one who'll have the key." He pulled a brass key from his pocket and placed it on the kitchen table. "There's a rifle in there too. Loaded. If anyone, including me, makes you feel unsafe, you use it." Ayanna picked up the key, her eyes never leaving his face. "You would arm someone you bought for $5. "I didn't buy you," Samuel said firmly. "I bought your freedom from those who would have hurt you. What you do with that freedom is up to you." Over the following weeks, an unexpected routine developed. Ayanna proved to be an excellent cook and housekeeper, but Samuel made it clear that such work was her choice, not her obligation. She tended a small garden behind the house, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil with a skill that amazed him. In the evenings she would sit on the porch, sometimes humming songs in her native language that made Samuel's chest tight with their haunting beauty. Samuel found himself looking forward to their conversations at dinner. Ayanna was intelligent and observant, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. She told him stories about her grandmother, who had been a medicine woman, and her brother, who had been a skilled hunter before the soldiers came. "What happened to your family?" Samuel asked one evening, immediately regretting the intrusive question. Ayanna was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. "Soldiers came to our village when I was 14. They said we had to move to the reservation. My parents and brother tried to resist." Her voice grew very soft. "They didn't survive the encounter. I was hidden by my grandmother until she died of sickness a year later. After that I survived however I could. Until," she gestured vaguely, "until you ended up at that auction," Samuel finished. She nodded. "A trader captured me 3 weeks ago, said I'd bring a good price as a house servant." Her laugh was bitter. "House servant. We both know what kind of service those men expected." Samuel felt rage burn in his chest, but he kept his voice gentle. "I'm sorry you've endured so much." "Why?" she asked, turning to look at him directly. "You did not cause my suffering." "Maybe not, but I'm part of a people who did." Ayanna studied his face in the firelight. "You are not responsible for the actions of all white men, Samuel Morrison, just as I am not responsible for the actions of all Cheyenne." As winter approached, their relationship began to shift in subtle ways. Samuel found himself teaching Ayanna to read from his collection of books, something she took to with remarkable speed. She showed him how to prepare traditional medicines from plants that grew wild on his property, knowledge that might help him avoid the long ride to town when illness struck. One snowy evening in December, Samuel found Ayanna crying quietly in the kitchen. It was the first time he'd seen her defenses completely down, and his heart ached for her. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. "Today is the anniversary of my family's death," she said through her tears. "In my culture we honor the dead with specific ceremonies, but I have no one to perform them with. no sacred items. Without thinking, Samuel reached out and took her hand. "Tell me what you need. We'll figure out a way." She looked up at him with surprise. "You would help me honor my heathen dead." "They weren't heathen," Samuel said firmly. "They were your family. That makes them worthy of honor in any language or faith." Together they created a ceremony that blended Cheyenne traditions with what Samuel could provide. They built a fire in the fireplace and burned sage that Ayanna had gathered and dried. She spoke words in Cheyenne while Samuel listened respectfully, and when she was finished, he said a prayer in English for the souls of people he'd never met but who had given life to someone precious. That night something changed between them. The careful distance they'd maintained began to dissolve, replaced by a deeper understanding and gradually, affection. Spring brought new challenges and new growth. Samuel's ranch was struggling financially, and he worried about making the next payment to the bank. Ayanna, who had proven remarkably good with numbers, offered to help him review his accounts. "You're too generous with your prices," she told him after studying his ledgers, "and you extend too much credit to people who never pay." "These are my neighbors," Samuel protested. "Some of them are struggling too." "Kindness is admirable," Ayanna said, "but not if it destroys your ability to help anyone. You cannot save others if you drown yourself." Her practical wisdom helped Samuel restructure his business practices. Within months the ranch was turning a modest profit. Samuel began to realize that Ayanna wasn't just surviving at his ranch, she was thriving, using skills and intelligence that the world had tried to strip from her. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Ayanna spoke unexpectedly. "I want to take your name," she said. Samuel nearly dropped his coffee cup. "What? Your name?" she repeated, looking at him steadily. "I want to be Ayanna Morrison." "Ayanna," Samuel struggled for words. "You don't owe me anything. You don't have to." "I do not speak from obligation," she interrupted. "I speak from choice. You gave me back my life, Samuel Morris. You treated me with dignity when I had forgotten what that felt like. You made me remember that I am more than what was done to me." Samuel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I care about you too," he said quietly. "More than I thought I could care about anyone again after Mary died." "I know," Ayanna said simply. "I have seen it in how you look at me, how you speak to me. You see Ayanna, not the savage girl you bought at auction, not the broken thing that men bid on like livestock." They were married in July by the circuit preacher with Miguel, Tom, and Billy as witnesses. The ceremony was simple, held on the ranch rather than in town, where curious eyes and wagging tongues might intrude. Ayanna wore a white dress that Samuel had ordered special from Denver, but she also wore beaded moccasins that she had made herself and a necklace of turquoise that had belonged to her grandmother. Their marriage was not without challenges. Some townspeople disapproved of the union, though most were too respectful of Samuel's reputation to voice their objections openly. Ayanna faced occasional slights and deliberate rudeness when she accompanied Samuel to town, insults she bore with the same quiet dignity she'd shown on the auction platform, but their love grew stronger with each passing season. Samuel delighted in Ayanna's quick wit and practical wisdom, while she found peace in his steady kindness and unwavering respect for her strength. They learned each other's languages, both literal and emotional, creating a private world of understanding on their ranch in the mountain. 2 years after their marriage, Ayanna gave birth to a daughter they named Hope. As Samuel held his tiny daughter for the first time, watching Ayanna smile with exhaustion and joy, he marveled at the journey that had brought them all together. "She's beautiful," he whispered, tears running down his weathered cheeks. "She is ours," Ayanna said simply, and in those words was all the love and family and future that neither of them had dared to dream possible on that dusty day in Millfield. Years later, when Hope was old enough to understand, they would tell her the story of how they met, not the shameful version involving auctions and desperate circumstances, but the true story, how a man chose to see the humanity in someone the world had discarded, and how a woman chose to trust in his kindness despite every reason to believe such kindness didn't exist. It was a story of two broken people who found healing in each other, who built something beautiful from the ashes of loss and trauma. It was a love story,
Yes, but more than that, it was a story of redemption, dignity, and the radical act of choosing to see the sacred worth in another human being. Samuel Morrison had bought a girl at auction for $5, but what he'd really done was save a life, gain a partner, and discover that love could grow in the most unlikely soil when tended with patience, respect, and hope.